You can be anything that you want to be. When I was a child growing up in my upper lower middle class family not too far from here in Scranton, Pennsylvania, I used to hear those words all the time from my parents, my grandparents, my teachers, the people on Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and practically every other grown-up in my life. Maybe you did too. 30 years later, it still makes me smile to recall the sense of freedom, wide and wild and unbounded, that their authoritative assurance of a possibility-filled future gave to me. Especially coming as it did with the commitment implicit to help me dream and become. It was a promise of mythological proportions. But it didn't take me long, though, to realize that it wasn't really true. That the mythological promise was just that, a myth. As I grew, I bumped into barriers. I crashed headlong into boundaries that I'd never even been warned were there. And slowly but surely, it taught me the truth. That there were some things that I could never be, no matter how badly I wanted to, no matter how hard I tried. I'm not talking about becoming president of the United States or an astronaut. No, it's deeper than that. There were whole identities I found that were forbidden to me. Ways of thinking and growing and relating and being that were just not allowed, not appropriate for me. And eventually, I got the message that what all those adults really meant was you can be anything you want to be within certain limits. You can be anything you want to be within reason. I learned, sometimes painfully, that just below that promise, just below its surface, there was a deep and dangerous subtext of caveats and provisos and conditions, and that if I valued the approval of the authority figures in my life and the respect of my peers, that I would do well to color within the lines. And so I learned to temper my dreams and to hide my hopes, to conform to the norms and to minimize my difference, to fit in. And I grew up. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think that my experience is all that uncommon. I think the world is full of children who have it in their hearts to be different. You know some of them, don't you? The little girl who dreams of becoming something that society is not quite comfortable with. The boy who expresses himself in ways that his peers don't approve of. The teen who communicates in ways that are unconventional, eccentric, ways that the adults around him deem disruptive. What about them? When we as adults tell them, you can be whatever you want to be, what do we mean? I bet that you believe, like I do, that whenever we stand before a child as a parent, a teacher, a mentor, a friend, that we make the same implicit commitment that we heard the first time the promise was made to us, to help with the dreaming and the becoming, to be catalysts for their growing into their full potential. Indeed, it's that commitment, it's that covenant that calls many of us into parenting or teaching or mentoring in the first place. Maybe you've even spoken those words to a child in your care, as encouragement perhaps after a particularly painful encounter with one of those barriers that I described. You can be anything you want to be. I have, to my own children. And I bet when you say it, you mean it the same way that I do. It's aspirational as much as it's inspirational. It's an expression of hope, not just for the child, but for the world. That things can be different, that they can be better. And it's an expression of a personal commitment to the changing of the world to make it so. How do we do that? How do we push back the boundaries, break down the barriers? How do we make the promise real for every child? Well, if that's the world of our grown-up dreams, we have to start with the reality that these non-conforming kids face now, by acknowledging that for all of our teaching about diversity and tolerance and respect for others and respect for ourselves, that our learning communities, like any social group, can be really hard on people who don't fit in. Despite our best efforts, there is a norming dynamic at work in these groups, practically every one of them. And it's not just hurting those for whom acquiescence to the norms doesn't come naturally, kids like I was. It's hurting everyone. I think that that dynamic is best understood and best addressed in terms of economics. Yeah, that's what I said. And that the center of this economics is something we all need, something we all crave. Abraham Maslow, the great psychologist, called it belongingness, the need to be accepted as a member of a group. And he placed it in his hierarchy of needs above almost everything else. Everything but the basics like food and water and physical safety. We'll call it social inclusion, and the economic system that underlies it, one in which we all participate, by the way, works in a way that, I'm willing to wager, runs counter to the values you hold as educators, mentors, parents, as people. Here's how it works. In our society, and in all of the groups and subgroups and sub-subgroups that comprise it, we treat inclusion as a good, a commodity. The work that we do to secure that good for ourselves is conformity. It's true, isn't it? We perform a labor, we wear a particular kind of clothes, we speak in a particular way, we express an interest in a particular set of things. We adhere to the norms of a particular group, and we're rewarded by that group with inclusion. When we do the work of conforming, it's like we're buying inclusion. And when we require others to conform in order to be included, we sell it. Are you with me here? I mean, this takes place in a particularly transparent way among children and youth, doesn't it, in traditional educational settings? Think cliques. But we all do it. Our methods just become more sophisticated, more subtle as we mature. And so we create a market where buyers and sellers of inclusion come together to trade, and the forces of supply and demand affect costs. And in this social inclusion marketplace, a person's ability to gain entry into a group is limited by the price that she's able and willing to pay, the norms that she can and will adhere to. For some, those whose natural inclinations and disposition line up with the norms of the group, it's literally a small price to pay. They receive the good of inclusion, and their need for belongingness is met simply by virtue of who they are. It's like privilege. But what about everyone else? Well, for us, those for whom being normal doesn't come naturally, well, our options are actually pretty limited. We can attempt to convert, to acquiesce to the norming pressure, and become something other than that which we envision ourselves to be. But in doing so, we dehumanize ourselves as our distinct sense of self becomes subsumed to that of others. We take active leading roles in our own destruction. Or we can choose to resist the pressure to normalize, but only so far as to make the pain of living a fractional life fall below our threshold of endurance. The problem with this choice, as logical as it sounds, is that it never works, because there is no static state in this system. The norming dynamic is like gravity. It pulls us downward until the potential energy of our individuality is spent in conforming. Another option, we can choose to abandon the community of learners for some other group, like a street gang, for example. Or we can quit the system altogether by taking our own lives. And tragically, many young people go this route, having found no way to meet both their need for belongingness and their need for self-actualization. Or, as the optimist, activist, social change agent in you is dying to say, we can choose to resist. But in the fragile days of youth, when your sense of ego has barely emerged from the protective cocoon of childhood, the life of resistance, of constant warfare, can seem like a pretty heavy burden to bear. That's the reality for the non-conforming child. And when we, as authority figures, allow this economy to play itself out, or worse, when we take a role in the enforcement of norms, as so many of us do, with the purest of motives and the best of intentions, we teach nonconformers that the way to get along in society is to self-suppress, to self-oppress. We become the ones adding the caveats and provisos to the promise, even as we're making it to them. And we teach the natural conformers that norming others into submission and sameness is an ethical practice that brings about a common good. In fact, we teach them that homogeneity is a common good, contrary to our message of respect for diversity and difference. We instruct nonconformers in the internalization of oppression and everyone else to become oppressors themselves, and they all grow up to do, well, the kinds of things that you saw splashed across the front page of the New York Times this morning. The kinds of things that grown-ups have been doing to one another since time immemorial. Well, I think we can do better than that. In fact, I know we can. We can change the entire system, make social inclusion work in a different way, a way that's fair and just, one that honors difference instead of just paying lip service to it. I believe we can make a world where everyone gets to play, no one's left out. And to prove it to you, I want to tell you a true story about a little boy who grew up in an upper, lower, middle-class family not far from here in Scranton, Pennsylvania, about 30 years ago. Where am I pointing here? Yeah, that's me. Can you just see the little fashionista getting ready to blossom out of that kid? Except, you see, when you're born a boy, that's not an allowable option. It's not appropriate. Never mind the fact that when the doctor handed me to my mom for the very first time and said, "It's a boy," he never stopped to ask me how I felt about the whole thing. When your dad's an Army Command Sergeant Major and a man's man and he expects you to follow in his footsteps, and when your mom tells you it's okay that you like to cook, really, just be careful who you tell about it. And When in your town the word sissy is the ultimate slur, and when in your school any boy who doesn't join Boy Scouts and the football team is automatically suspect, well, blossoming just isn't in the cards. You cover up, you hide, you survive. And so that's what I did. I joined the Scouts and the football team, and I went to West Point, and I joined the Army. I cooked sometimes, but I never wore an apron. I met a wonderful girl. I got married, had children, and lied to them all about who I really was. I lied to everyone, even myself. But the day eventually came when, in the words of Cuban author Anais Nin, the risk to remain tight in the bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. And so it was when I began my gender transition, I was completely alone. I had never in my adult life told anyone how I felt. I'd never known anyone who had done what I was contemplating doing. The road ahead was daunting. The prospect of walking it alone, terrifying. The day I found myself seriously considering suicide was the day that I knew I needed help. And so I picked up the phone and I called my sister. And my sister said, "I'm here for you." And I called my mom. And my mom said, "I'm proud of your courage. I'm proud to call you my daughter." I talked to my wife. And my wife said, "My love for you is bigger than this. I'll be right by your side through whatever this brings and beyond." Eventually, I talked to my dad. Actually, I wasn't that brave. I wrote him a letter. And when he got it, the command sergeant major called me. And he said, "I love you as much today as I did the day you were born." Each one of them made a decision to stand with me, to walk with me, to hold me and each other up. They chose loyalty to a set of values, values like unconditional love, over loyalty to a set of norms. Together we made the hard journey, and the life that we share today is better than any of us ever could have imagined, which leads us to the crucial question: is there really a limited supply of social inclusion? Do we limit it artificially by uncritically declaring certain ways of being and doing and thinking acceptable and others inappropriate? If we each play a part in including or excluding others based on their adherence to social norms, artificially limiting the number of people who receive the benefits of inclusion, then in what sense can we consider ourselves to be good or just people? In what sense can our economy of inclusion be considered fair and equitable? If we chose to, couldn't we create a system in which all inclusion is not a commodity, but is something we offer freely to everyone, a basic human right? Couldn't we alter our inclusion economy such that no person's included status depends upon the way that they dress, or the way that they speak, or the way that they learn, or the way that they love? And if we can, shouldn't we? Indeed, if we've got the power to do this and we don't, what kind of people have we become? Thanks.